Hi, everyone. Good morning. All right. Okay. So last class, we were talking about, well, lots of different things. And we're beginning to transition from getting out of our mind only hats. And we're going to start moving into the middle way for the last two classes. So we're going to be moving kind of at a rapid pace to really like get through all of it. And even the original courses, um, Geshe even said in them, he's like, yeah, we probably should have a whole course on the independent branch of the mind of the middle way school. Um, but we only got 15 courses. So it's a really intense download in the last two classes, which I think is kind of auspicious for us to gather all the pieces that we need to intellectually understand emptiness, to intellectually understand all the different presentations and how it all appears to us in our own mind, right? Because the whole idea of what we're doing is, can we identify in ourselves the wrong thinking? That's all. And all the sneaky ways that our mind says, no, 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 you're wrong. All of those things that like wake you up at 3 a.m. and then keep you laying in bed staring at the ceiling, right? You know, even like where does that come from, right? Good luck trying to think about emptiness at 3 in the morning when you're tired and you're sleepy and all you want to do is rest. And but the main idea here is, can we get the whole download so then we can start deconstructing it? And at the end of the day, the only one who can deconstruct it is you. Like there's not anything that anyone else really can do for you in that. Well, right, Tracy. Yeah, open up some Dharma in the middle of the night. That'll put you back to sleep very fast. Um, but you see, like what we're trying to understand is the Buddha presented so many different ways to understand emptiness. And all of them, many of them are not emptiness itself. But it becomes this kind of delayering process, taking it apart piece by piece, right? And then from there, you should be able to, at least have some insights, bit by bit, and it grows. It's not something that like spontaneously happens overnight. We all want to wake up and have that one special meditation where we're like, finally, I get to see emptiness directly, you know. But it happens in stages and it happens in steps and it happens in unexpected ways. And so having all the tools available then make it possible that when you're getting closer, or you're like, oh, this is what I should do now. This is what I should do next. This is what I should do last. Right. And I think that's where understanding the whole path is important. And that's why we spend hours of our time in class. So I apologize for hours in class. If you're feeling like you're not making progress, don't worry, you are. It's just it takes time. It takes, I mean, even baby steps sometimes feel backwards. So today we're going to be going deep into the lower branch of the middle way school, the independent school. And we're going to go and we're going to quickly summarize that entire branch in an hour and a half, you know. So my suggestion today is get out your notebooks, get out your pens and papers. By the way, for those of you who are too young to remember, paper and pen help you remember more than typing on your computer. I promise you. Having to go between your brain into your hand and then writing the words versus just typing what you hear on your on the computer. I'm sure it's empty, and I'm sure you can argue with me. It's all empty, Tim. But we still have bodies, and our bodies still, have patterns in them. I'm getting to the point where I don't even want to look at my phone very much because I feel like it's making me dumber. So make yourself smarter. Do things that make yourself smarter, not dumber. Yes, you can type it out on the computer. That's fine if that's all you have. But I'm suggesting paper and pencil or paper and pen. You know, there's something about having to synthesize, because if you're just trying to transcribe, just turn on the transcribe thing in Zoom and then just download it, right? You can do that. I think there's a transcription, right? Yeah, there's captions, transcription. You can download it, right? Do that. But the act of then having to synthesize, hear, think, write, to remember, those are all things that are going on. And that's also why we're doing the 15 months of review for ACI 16, 17, and 18. So, because you need to hear it a billion times. You have to hear it over and over again. And so each layer that we present, you're not going to get right away. And each time that I teach these classes, I'm like, oh, well, that's what's going on there. So just suffer. enjoy the suffering of class, because the rest of life will bring about other kinds of suffering. Okay. So we were talking about external objects. And honestly, I think I said everything. I don't know if I went through all the homework questions exactly. And I know I've said most of the things. So I'm going to pretend that we did finish the last class. You can find all the answers in the reading. You can do the studying. And if you need help, you can ask your friends. And if after asking all of your friends and you study and you still don't know the answer to something, maybe we can have a Q&A at some point. Okay. Your goal is to learn how to learn. Okay. And so one of the things that I'm trying to instill a bit is, yes, coming to class is wonderful. Listening to your favorite teacher, Tim, talk twice a week is wonderful. I hope I'm your favorite teacher, at least for 60 people, fine. I don't know if I'm your favorite teacher or not. It doesn't matter. But there's a certain thing that happens where, like, if you just get used to listening, and then expecting, oh, that person's going to give me answers or all that, it's all going to be there. Yes. If you have the karma for that, sure. But at the end of the day, you're the one who has to think through it. you have to learn. You have to be able to then go in and be like, okay, what's going on? Right? There's no, you know, the Dharma will sit inside you and marinate and come out when you need it. But we have to learn how to learn ourselves. Right. And yes, there will always be classes, and yes, there will always be time to listen. Right. But listening is only part of it. Like tu sam gom. Tu is listening, sam is contemplating, gom is meditating on it. Right. It's only one of the three. And I would say while we spend more time in listening, seems like it at some point, it's the other parts that need to be exercised. And then when you get stuck, then you can then reaching out for support. Um, but so what we're gonna do is we're gonna be giving you all the information you need, and then say, all right, you got it. Good luck on your way to enlightenment, right? There's obviously more, but understanding all of these different aspects will make your life better, and it will make the difficult times less difficult, even though the intensity of the difficulties will remain the same for a while. So in the lower middle way, there's this unique position that they take, and this is part of the book that I'm translating, the Abhisamaya Alankara, which outlines the way that they talk about emptiness is that there's degrees to it. There's obvious or gross is not disgusting. It means gross means like more apparent. There's more apparent ways, and then there's more subtle ways. And it gets divided between the emptiness of people and the emptiness of things. And for those of you who are wondering, because we asked this question, I don't know, quite a while ago in the Lam Rim class teaching on emptiness. Why is the emptiness of people, the lack of self-existence to people, easier to understand the lack of self-existence to things? We asked this question, right? Because we always teach the pen first, right? But there's a debate about it. Like, why do we then say that, or why does the lower middle way even say that is the emptiness of people that's easiest to understand first, and then the emptiness of things? Okay. We're going to get that answer right now. And I've been holding on to it for quite a while. Hopefully, I'm sure you've been obsessing over this question in your meditation, right? Yes, I know. I can see burning. It was burning in your meditations. So basically the lower middle way presents emptiness in terms of, if we want to call it degrees or we call it stages. Like they call it like there's stages of emptiness realizations. Right. And even they themselves will admit that the lower stages are not emptiness. But the funny thing is, even in the lower middle way, their presentation of what they say is emptiness isn't emptiness either. So guess what? you know. And I think it's incredibly useful and it's incredibly powerful, because each of the stages, each of the degrees of understanding, maybe we call it dependence, gives you insight into what emptiness is and what emptiness is not. And each of the stages can help us go a little bit further. So the lower middle way presents, there's three primary stages that they give us. three degrees of emptiness. All right. And those degrees of emptiness are, again, related to two things, people and things. All right. So let's have a look at this. We have a nice little chart coming up. Let me get this up here. Okay. There's four things for us to pay attention to. This is going to be analytical, so just hold on to it. Four things. There's the emptiness to people and the emptiness to things. Okay. And then there's two levels. There's the gross, like the more apparent, most obvious, and then there's the subtle, right? Trarak. So the first level, okay, that we're going to look at is they say that the first degree of emptiness is the subtle lack, make sure I get my language right, of a self to people. The subtle lack of self to people. So here's our little emoji. Okay. That's level one. We're going to discuss each one. So just hold on. Level two. Now, the level two is the gross lack of a self to things. All right. Okay. Why did I put a hand, a bicep, and a leg? You know, they're parts of a body. That's correct. So we have to understand something a little important here is that the distinction that we make between people and things is things is a code word in Buddhism in this case. It's not things like pens. Things is a code word for parts of the person. So when we say the subtle lack of a self to people, we're talking about the whole. When we're talking about the lack of a self to things, whether gross or subtle, we're talking about the parts of a person. Okay. So you have to keep that in mind when you're thinking about this. And we'll explain what that means in a moment. That's why I have things like hands, biceps, and legs. Right? They're very sexy. They're yellow. I chose the yellow emoji to be racially neutral. Okay. Right. Not too many people are sun yellow or whatever color yellow that is. Right. Okay, so that's the second one. So the first level is the subtle lack of a self to people. The second level is the gross lack of self to things, meaning the parts of a person. And you can probably guess that the subtle lack of a self to things, the parts of a people, is the third level, which they say is the actual emptiness. Okay. All right. We have a box missing here. We have the gross lack of a self to people. Okay. Why is that not mentioned? it's not mentioned because it's just too obvious that they basically say any normal person can understand that. Okay. And we'll talk about what it is in a second, what that is. So basically, there's four components here: gross, subtle, people, things, right? And so these are the three different aspects that we're going to be looking at in the lower middle way: the subtle lack of self to people, subtle lack of the gross lack of self to things, and then the subtle lack of self to things. And those are the three levels of emptiness in the lower middle way. And we're going to talk about what they mean and then how are they useful for you. Okay. Now we'll get there in a second. So that one that we're canceling, the gross lack of a self to people, right? What does that, what does that have to do? Like, why are we just ignoring it? Because there is a kind of emptiness to it, of course, but why are we ignoring it? And why are they saying that it's not even worth thinking about? So they say that it's not worth thinking about because it's so obviously non-existent. Like they say that this is such an obvious non-existent thing, right? To think that a person is like unchanging, eternal, right? Something that's not something that's totally independent of causes and conditions, right? So like even just general religions, the idea that there's a soul, that there's a that there's a mind, that if you experience yourself, like there's a body and mind, like that, to consider yourself a complete, unchanging, independent of causes and conditions, self-substantial being. No one really thinks that, like at a total gross level. That's what they say. Like no one's really going there, right? So there's really no reason to address it. But I slightly disagree. And why do I slightly disagree? Because there are times when we believe that things are never going to change. Things are always going to be this way. It is eternally going to be like this. Even if you accept some kind of aging process, like there's something in our mind that gets obsessed with those kinds of things. And you see it happens to a lot of people, and it happens, any even great practitioners, you know I've seen people get stuck in these things, and I've gotten stuck in it too. Like get sick for a couple months, depression, right? There are certain things that can happen to us that get us stuck in that, right? So in some ways it is kind of a first level, like it is the first flavor of emptiness, just to understand that things will change. It doesn't really take a lot of thought to do so, because enough experience will show us that. But most beings, I would say most beings are actually stuck in that. They don't see anything different. Like my cats don't seem to think that way. Like Tracy mentioned someone having a serious brain injury, right? Someone who has some kind of mental expression, whether it's some kind of syndrome or depression or whatever you want to call it, right? It's all like, it's unreflected. Matak machepa, like you're going through things, right? So I think it's important for us to recognize that a lot of people are actually in this, right? Yes, we're in ACI 15. I'm hoping that most of us have moved beyond this, at least intellectually at times, right? You know, but watch yourself, catch yourself in it. Like, I can't do this anymore. I'm over my head. Like, I can't think of solutions. Nothing's going to change. I'm stuck. Like, I'm sick. I'm not going to get better. Like, I love that some people are exercising during this class. That's great. Get your body moving. Healthy for you. It's not emptiness at all, right? Emptiness isn't, oh, it's a changing thing, but understanding that or thinking that it's a changing thing. Like that's a thing for us to even just consider. It is a changing thing. Um, and so if things are changing, they can't be eternal, right? I mean, and we recognize that, like, you know, if you think you're sick and you're staying sick for a long time, you're probably more afraid of death than you're afraid of being sick, right? You're afraid that this life is going to end, right? You feel like and then you're afraid that you don't know if you even have a soul or what's going to happen next, right? I think it's more along those lines, but the mind holds on, it gets stuck, right? So that's first level. Um, Second level, which is actually the first degree of the lower middle way, is a subtle lack of a self nature to persons, right? And we're talking about the whole person. The fact that there's no self nature to Tim, no self nature to Tracy McKenzie, right? And we're going to go deeper into this in a second. But like understanding that the whole me is not me, right? And that's actually quite a deep understanding, right? To go into a place to say, look, there's no self nature to Tim. It's just something that gets put onto this thing, this blob that's called Tim. This blob that hasn't exercised recently and is not sleeping well and not eating well and getting older and getting grumpier, whatever. Right. So we've talked about this in many, many different ways. You're going to see in the lower middle way that some of the presentations of the other schools are there. So they're actually summarizing some of the other schools to say this is how we get to actual emptiness, which ends up not being actual emptiness. Okay. All right. So you guys are going to get a whole bunch of Buddhism and lists throughout the rest of this class. Good luck. Yes. Okay. So you've heard of things like the three tracks, the three ways. What's the other three in this one? I can't remember the third one. There's so many threes. 3 degrees of emptiness. One more. The three scopes. All right. And they get confusing when we use the language. So, translators, interpreters, this is a great time to study. I love seeing you here, Janet. It's wonderful to see you. So, we're going to start relating all of those things together in one big blob of class in 1 hour. So, just hold on, and then you get to meditate on it, because then next class we're going to the upper middle way. So, there's three scopes of practice. Okay. Excuse me. I already messed it up. There are three tracks. Okay. There's three tracks of practitioners. Each one relates to the 3 degrees of emptiness. All right. And this is my favorite slide that I've made in a long, long time. Here they are, the three tracks. Got an ear. You got a red velvet pre-made cake box. And you have Maitreya. Come on, Laura, you can do it. She shakes her head, trying to understand what the hell is going on here. So there's three tracks, and each one relates to an understanding of the degree of emptiness. So let's go back to track number 1. Got an ear. Some people are grossed out by ears. Some people like to give acupuncture in ears. Some people like, you should go get your ears cleaned every once in a while. It's gross. Okay. And many of you should get your ears cleaned because you're not listening well enough. Can't hear the words going in. Too much junk in between. What the heck do I mean by that? The first track is called the listener track. All right. And the people who are on the listener track are capable of understanding the first degree of emptiness. And that first degree of emptiness is the subtle lack of a self nature to persons. Okay. So, what does this mean? What does a ninta mean? A listener, right? And don't think just because it's track 1 that it's stupid and it's lower and it's inferior and that only the idiots go there. Okay. That's not how it works. It's not how it works. It's actually not about lower goals either. That relates to the scopes, not to the tracks. Okay. So someone who's a listener has a certain kind of spiritual capacity, we'll call it. Right. And that capacity is that you're able to listen to the Mahayana teachings. Okay. Able to even report them to other people. You're able to go to the teacher trainings. You're able to go to the debate ground. You're able to repeat what they say, which is a very incredibly important step. All right. But the listener person is just listening, meaning they don't have the ability to fully practice it yet. They say that, you could even get the tantric teachings, the high holy diamond way teachings, but you're not mature enough yet to practice it. Okay. And if we're truly honest with ourselves, okay, how does that go? I'm going to go on a trip for a second. Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. Okay. I come to bury Caesar and not to praise him. The evil that men do live lives after them, the good is often turned with. Okay. Enough. Shakespeare. All right. Friends, Dharma practitioners, bodhisattvas, lend me your ears. Okay. Give me your ears, right? That's the first step is give your ears. Give your ears to the Dharma. Give your ears to your higher goals. Listen, right? It's a very, very big step to clean out all the gunky earwax in those ear canals. I was in Taiwan and they did this to me once. It was gross. It's like I didn't know all that stuff was in there, right? I thought my Q-tip was doing a good job, right? The first step is to listen and listen clearly and listen well. To be able to practice, you have to understand all the things, right? And so that's where we start. And if we're really honest with ourselves, we're probably more listening than anything else, right? But that's okay because that's where, you can have a degree of, you can have a view of emptiness. It's pretty deep, actually, just by listening, to understand the subtle lack of a self to people, the whole self, not the parts, but the people, the whole person. That didn't do anything. There it did. Okay. So you can get very, very far, right? And that's part of the process. To some gom, you have to listen and just spend the time listening, which is in a way deconstructing all the other ideas that you have in your mind, right? And that deconstruction process takes time. Like put new ideas in there while all the other ideas are still floating around. It's not going to just shift in one day, and that's okay. But you have to listen, right? And that's why you go back to classes over and over again. Somebody asked me, oh, I got my 18 courses done. What's next? And I said, do them again. They're like, what? And I said, do them again. Listen again, because you didn't hear it the first time. You heard some things, of course. You know, I've done them many times. I do them again when I'm teaching them. You hear new things, right? You're only able to hear certain things that you're only able to take in a certain amount of new information and integrate it. Right. So you integrate round one, then you go and integrate round two, and then you integrate round three. And that's why we go to classes all the time. I was sitting in some classes last week and I was like, God dang, I've heard this a gazillion times. And then I looked around and I'm like, oh, most of the people in the room are new students. I was like, oh, and that's why Geshe is teaching it this way because it's all brand new for them. He's circling around again. Start the process again. And then I was like, just because I've heard it a million times, do I actually understand it? Like, and that's a different question, right? Just because you can rattle it off and you can debate it and you can do a Maroc and prove that you know the words doesn't mean that you've integrated. And so step one is, and it's a very powerful step, is just getting all the, if you're a chemist, you get all the chemicals you get all the chemicals first, right? You get all your things get ready, you know, and then you start putting them into the beaker, right? And then you start seeing what happens, right? And then it becomes a mess because you don't know how to put them in right. You put too much of that and too little of this, and you have an explosion, and then you're like shit. And then and then you put stuff in, and then nothing happens, and you're like, well, why is nothing happening, right? And then you start experimenting, right? And so, but you need to know all the chemicals. You need to know all the things you can put in. If you just put a couple of things in, you might get some results, and that's why we start slow. That's why you do. We give you 4 steps. We give you 4 powers, right? We give you all the information. It's all there. Da-da-da-da, where's it coming from? Do you remember where it's coming from, Tim? No, you don't. Of course, you don't remember. That's why you have to keep teaching this. If you remembered, you wouldn't have to teach it. Right? I don't know if that's true, but you see, and so bit by bit, we move deeper onto the path, right? So what are we seeing as the empty, like what does the emptiness look like at this level? And the way it looks like is this: the absence of a self-standing substantial thing. What the hell does that mean? The absence of a self-standing substantial thing, right? What it means is you are not in control. You are not the director and driver of your body and mind, which is supposedly separate from you. Okay. You think you're in control, especially when things are going great. When things are going wonderfully well, you're in control, right? I got this. You feel confident. You feel strong. You feel, I got this. I can do anything, right? And then what does your teacher do? Francisco gives you an impossible project that you can't possibly do on your own to teach you the subtle lesson that you're not in control, right? You're not in control. And if you don't have a teacher who teaches you that, you know who teaches you it? Life. Guys, I've been up since 2:30 this morning. Why? I don't know. I slept for 4 hours and 20 minutes, according to my sleep monitor. Okay, I was sleeping pretty well. And then I woke up and I've been up all night. I don't have any fucking control of that. Okay. I have zero control. I tried meditation. I tried acupuncture. I tried yoga nidra. I tried breathing techniques. I tried reading Dharma. Yeah, all of those things put you back to sleep, right? The only thing I thought about doing was taking melatonin, but that was at 4:30. And I was like, that would be dumb because then I won't wake up for class. And maybe even then it wouldn't work, right? You don't have control. And if you thought you had control, you know, that's where, that life will teach you otherwise, right? And so this is the basis of the listener track. There's your little dirty ear, right? And I also chose this picture because this guy has a big ear, you see. But you're not in control. Oh, you're not being shared right now. Sorry. You know, you're not in control. You never were in control. Okay. Oh, Tim, well, then it's hopeless. I said I didn't say that. It's not hopeless. but you didn't understand what you have control of and what you don't have control of. Right. And so, like, the first level of understanding emptiness, according to the lower middle way, which is actually flavor number 2. For those of you who have studied the 6 flavors, I think Geshe gave a great class recently on it. Yeah, Tracy. I'm going to blame it on my channels. I don't know. I bet you even if I had a massage, I wouldn't even have gone back to sleep. So, but the first level is to understand that you don't have control. And a lot of people can't handle that. And that's why they don't go further, right? Because it's too heavy. They want to have control, right? Try to argue with someone who wants to be in control. No matter how wrong they are, they're still right. You ever try to see, like, you know, I was, I also tried scrolling on Facebook and I read stupid stuff about politics in the United States. And I almost commented on a senator's post. Oh, I'm going to tell him what an idiot he is. Right? Like, I'm in control. I can leave a nasty comment on Facebook. Come on. It's so dumb. Right. But that's level 1 emptiness. You thought you were in control and you're not, you know, and there's a path, there's a way of, how do I say this? Moving through that without getting depressed or getting upset or getting down on yourself. Like, that's a, you know, it's a difficult thing. And that's why when we're talking about, like, that's why we also talk about seeds right away, right? There is we can plant different seeds, but the things in the moment we can't control. I can't control that I woke up at 2 fucking 30 in the morning, right? And couldn't go back to sleep. I didn't have any caffeine. I had a really nice soft dinner, blah, 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 blah. And, like, no, like, that's not like, look for the causes. Like, the causes are not those things. The causes are elsewhere, right? So the least I could do was not get upset about it. I got upset once. What did I get upset about? As all I wanted is a hug, and I had no one here to hug me. And so I tried to hug my cats, and they didn't want to hug me. And then I was like, this sucks. Not even my cats want to hug me. Right? Maybe I need to give more hugs. I don't know. But you see, like, the only thing you can do, because it's already ripening, is, like, understand what's ripening for you and then plant different seeds that hopefully in the future you can stay asleep. Right? That's why we teach seeds first. It's not depressing, but I can understand why it gets there. Right? When you realize you're not in control and you never were in control, your seeds are in control. They're not even yours. Okay. Stop thinking they're yours. Like, seeds are in control. Right? Well, no, I have a cat that likes to hug, but my cat that likes to hug also has a twitch and won't sit still. So it's impossible to go back to sleep with a cat that's hugging, that's constantly like, ugh. Yes, they're challenging huggers, correct. You know, and then when you don't want them to hug, then they cuddle in and then annoy you. You see, it's samsara is beautifully annoying. Thank you all very much. I'm a little punchy this morning because I've been up for 4 hours, 5 hours. Okay, that's the first place, right? Is that you perceive that there's no independent being running the show, right? And that's a powerful, powerful realization just by being a listener, just listening. You can get that far, no problem, right? But that's a pretty deep thing to recognize. And then to be able to move through that and to keep going. Now, the listeners have a belief, and the belief is that the self does exist. There is a self that exists, which is the one that's listening to the thoughts. That's just a little aside. Okay. All right. That's the first level. And that's pretty, I'm guessing that most of you probably have already had that renunciation to recognize that you're not in control. You wouldn't be here this long otherwise. But even in some way that, like, if you have practiced enough and listened enough, and that when you have these moments, you can just think, well, I'm not in control. Guess what? I had that thought at 4:45. Oh, I'm not in control of this. Great. I wasn't upset. And then I went to sleep for approximately 20 minutes. Thank you. Great. Thanks. Right. Great. But like, if you can think to yourself, I'm not in control, but there's an awareness behind it that sees it, there's something, there is a kind of liberation that happens in that thought. It's not nirvana at all, but there is a kind of liberation, and you can think about it. All right. The next level, second level of emptiness, is the subtle lack, excuse me, the gross lack of self nature to objects. Right. So we have to go back here and need to show you guys something. And this track is for those called the Rangsanges, called the self-made Buddhas. And that's why I chose a red velvet boxed chocolate boxed cake, pre-made. All you need to do, add eggs, add a little bit of water, a little bit of oil, and poof, you have a red velvet cake. All right. Pre-made. What is a Rangsange? What is a self-made Buddha? It's neither self-made nor is it a Buddha. But what do we mean by that? Is that a self-made Buddha is someone who appears without a teacher in this life, but they have amazing karma. All right. So a self-made Buddha is someone who is not yet a Buddha. They're able to achieve a lower nirvana, meaning they're able to remove all their mental afflictions. And they're able to do it without a teacher in this life. But what it means is they had gazillions of teachers in other lives. They just woke up in this life, pre-packaged in the box, right? All the ingredients were there, right? And all they had to do was live a little bit. Their bakchak sepas went off, right? All those seeds went off, and they were able to achieve a lower nirvana. All they needed to do was live, put an egg in, right? Put a little bit of water in, and then poof, you have a full, beautiful red velvet cake, free of negative emotions and on the lower track. Right? You can't actually become a Buddha on this track, but it's pretty damn cool. So I had my teacher criticized me one day. At first, I thought it was a compliment, and then I realized it was a heavy criticism. It was one of the best, like one of the best I've ever gotten. And I was walking, it was just us in a room, and I was walking through, fixing something, and he says to me, "Yeah, you know, you're a wrong Sangye. You're a self-made Buddha." And I was like, "Oh man, I'm doing fucking awesome." Then he walked away, and then I realized what he meant. What he meant was is I wasn't listening to my teacher, literal or figurative. I'm not literally a wrong Sangye. Forget it, right? I'm not a self-made Buddha at all, right? And I was like, what the fuck does that mean? Like, it felt like a compliment, and then it was like right in the heart. And it was such a powerful statement because I realized what I realized is that I wasn't listening to the teachings. I wasn't listening to the teachers. I wasn't asking for help. I was just doing shit. And I was running off of what he was saying was I was running off my previous good karma, right? And I was like, oh man, I had to lick my wounds when I went home because I realized I was like, oh, I'm not actually listening. I'm doing what Tim wants to do. Tim thinks he wants to, you know, be a better practitioner, a better person. But Tim wasn't listening. Tim wasn't accepting, right? It changed everything afterwards, you know, and it was a big hit on my pride. It was like, oh, it hurt, you know. And a lot of us have these tendencies. Look, I'm not saying this just to be like, you know, not comforting. Like all of these things that we learn is because we have these tendencies ourselves. Like most of you have beautiful, beautiful seeds from things you've done before that you're just running on right now. Like they're in the background. You don't have control of them. And you thought you were a good person. You are good people. Okay. But you're not a good person because the way you think you're a good person. You're a good person because you're running off old seeds, you know, and so you have to be very careful, right? A lot of people will say, oh, you know, like I'm afraid to lose my teacher. Yeah, you should be because you probably found them not because you tried, but because you had good seeds from a past life, right? And so then you have to keep them going because at some point those seeds could run out. And I've seen it run out for a lot of people. It just vanishes. It vanishes. Good seeds will just vanish, you know, and hopefully not too many of them vanish at the same time. So then you're able to, you know, keep planting the new ones. That's why we need to do our practices. That's why we need to do our book practice, you know, because you're not doing it for tomorrow. You're doing it for the time when your good seeds that you brought into this life wear out. So you have a whole bank of things that are running behind it. Why are you saying this, Tim? It's for my own benefit to remind myself. Okay. Because I could lose my teachers. I could lose all of that. You could. You could lose it. Right. And you should have a little healthy fear around it. Okay. So, what can a self made Buddha on this track see? The gross lack of self nature of objects. Da, 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 da. Which one is it? We've been studying this all course. Ta da! The red velvet cake, free main box of the mind only school understanding of emptiness, where the seed, the thing that is perceived and the perceiver are coming from the same seed. They are the same substance. Body and mind are different material causes. They're coming from the same seed. And this we could have a whole class on all of this. Physical matter and the mind that perceives it are devoid of coming from separate seeds. The karma that created the objects in the world and your situation and the perception of those things are the same karma. And this is the obvious form of the lack of self nature to the parts of a person. Okay. And you have to spend time thinking about, like, how does it, like, we say things, right? But in the mind only school, what we're looking at is our mind only. We're only looking at the seed opening up as an external object. Sure, there's dependent things. There's shengwangs out there just doing shenwangy things, whatever shengwangs do, right? Minus your kuntaks. But this is this subtle lack, excuse me, this is the obvious, the gross lack of self nature to objects or the parts of a person. Okay. It's the red velvet cake mix that comes in a box for the self-made Buddhas. This is what a self-made Buddha can understand. And this is deep, right? This is, I mean, we've already talked about it, but this is incredibly deep. And this is the mind only's understanding of emptiness. They say that that's emptiness. Which we know it's not, but it's a stage, it's a step. This is why the lower middle way is so cool. All right, third level. This one is for the bodhisattvas. Okay, this is the third track. This is the bodhisattva track. We got some Maitreya here. This is Bodhisattva Maitreya, or maybe it's Buddha Maitreya, depending how you look at it. So if you're on the Bodhisattva track, we have to understand what it means, but the emptiness in this track means that no existing thing in the universe has any real existence. Definition. Okay, here's what it means. Here we go, interpreters. If there could be something that existed from its own side, if it could exist from its own side, just pretending, right? Right. Through its own unique identity. So if something could appear from its own side through some unique identity without, minus, subtract, without being established as existing as it appears to a unaffected state of mind. I'll say it differently in a second. That's what the independent school means. It truly exists. So if it could exist through some unique identity of its own, without being perceived as existing by you, that's what it would mean to be truly existent in the independent way, the independent branch of the middle way school. So the idea here is that there's two things going on. Oops, we're going to call it the 50-50 school, the 50-50 understanding. Okay. Two things have to be present in the independent school. First is there's a part of it that appears from its own side. And then the other part is I have to be perceiving it with this clear state of mind. Okay. So the thing that is denied is that if a pen appears to an undistorted state of mind, it's said to exist. Meaning, there's something out here that's doing something that has some unique identity of its own. And then I'm doing something with my mind that I'm perceiving it. Right. And so, like when we teach this, when we teach the pen, and we oftentimes say, all right, we're going to leave this object here, and all the humans leave the room, all the dogs leave the room. Okay. In that moment, what is it? Right. And we say nothing yet. Right. We can say, if we just say nothing, right, we're edging closer to the upper middle way. If we say nothing yet, we're edging closer to the independent school. Okay. And then you sometimes shift the language based on the audience so they can understand. Like if you say nothing is there, most people will be like, fuck you, there's a thing there, right? It doesn't just disappear because someone walks out of the room. That's hocus pocus. There's no magic like that. You see, so when you say nothing yet, you think there's something out there that's announcing itself. And then you come along and then you open your eyes and you're like, oh, hello. Hello, pen. You're my best friend. All right. And so the independent school will say there is something independent out there doing its own thing. It's similar to a Shengwang, but more advanced. Okay. Because the independent school will pull away from the idea that there's something ultimate about a Shengwang. And we'll say that because Shengwangs depend on causes and conditions, independent, completely separate from your kuntaks. The independent school is going to be like, well, no, the causes and conditions are actually karmically in you. They kind of make a shift. Although mind only school will say that as well. So there's ambiguity. But one pulls, like we learned last week, that the Shenwangs do exist by definition, right? And so the independent school kind of merges all of this together and is kind of saying, to establish that there's a pen. It's not like there was something there first, but there is something there contributing to making it a pen. And it's tied in with your perception. And so there's two qualities that need to be present. It has to be appearing from its own side as a pen, and I have to be perceiving it as a pen. Those two things kind of come together 50-50. And that feels pretty comfortable for a lot of us. Okay. And then when we move to the upper middle way, we're going to understand that this has parts too, right? And the thing that we're calling a pen or a cylinder or something like that also has parts. And you can't find the thing that you were looking for. And that's the higher meaning of emptiness. But in the meantime, matak machepa, don't think too hard, right? Because if you think too hard, it's going to send you into crazy town. Okay. So, or otherwise known as the one of the extremes. Okay. There is something there, right? And that's what, and the middle, the independent branch of the middle way school will say that that's enough to reach Buddhahood. Of course, the mind only says, Jason Kappa says that about the mind only school too. So figurative or literal, your problem. So the independent school, let me make sure I get this right. That the way that they get out of it is they say objects do exist from their own side, but not uniquely, because they require your mind to think about them. That's how they get out of it. That's how they say 50-50. They don't believe that objects exist uniquely from their own side. It requires your perception to make them. But they do believe that there is an object there that does exist. Right? And that's why it's called independent school, because it's not there independently. The pen is not there independently, it's dependent upon you. There is no pen there without you. Well, what's there? That doesn't matter. Dog sees a chew toy, you see a pen. Well, actually, it does matter. And it matters in a very, very deep way. Okay. So those are the three tracks. All right. Now we're going to just fly through the other things to make sure that you get all the material. So we have 3 degrees of emptiness, and they go on the 3 tracks. Okay. And if you look at all of those things, it's the almost 6 flavors of emptiness. We actually talked about 4, because the 4th one is the gross lack of a self to people, which is everything changes, right? This too will pass. Things will change. So we have 4 of the 6 right there, just in the independent branch of the middle way, which is basically outlining a path to the upper middle way through weaving through the other schools. All right. I bet you there's more information than you ever wanted. So there are 3, let's see here, 3 scopes now. We talked about 3 tracks. Now there's 3 scopes. Okay. What do they mean? And these are motivations, okay, which are different than tracks. Motivation number one, scope number one. Those who just want to stay out of their own the lower realms for their own benefit, right? Get out, right? Get to avoid being in the hell realms, right? Burning in on fire. Okay. You don't want to go there. You want to stay out of those things. It's a motivation. Okay. Motivations are different than spiritual capacities, which are tracks. Okay. So you have to think about that a little bit because you could have a bodhisattvic motivation and still be a listener. You see, you can be a listener and only want to get out of the lower realms. The two are independent of each other, linked, but not directly. The second scope, I was funny, whomever Z, when you mentioned The Simpsons, I was so excited. I'm like, there's a Simpsons slide. In the second scope is those who want to escape suffering and permanently eliminate their mental afflictions, but just for their own benefit. Okay. So we have Homer just being like, me, right? Again, not a bad motivation, right? Not a bad motivation at all, right? To reach a place where you no longer have mental afflictions. Wonderful. That's amazing, right? But you're still mainly thinking only about yourself. Now, I might have to make a little argument here that to reach nirvana, you might have to know how to plant seeds. And by planting seeds, you might have to take care of other people. So it's really weird to just think that you're only helping yourself. I don't know. Let's take it to the debate ground. By the way, we're going to be having an extensive debate program in Kyoto, so you should come. Many of you have been asking. I've been whining about it, saying it's impossible, but it's not impossible. We just wouldn't do it yet. So, but seriously, like we could debate that. Like, if you're just trying to get to nirvana for yourself, could you get there without helping other people? The answer is probably not, but your deeper motivation is slightly in a different direction. I'm sorry, I don't know about you, but I just think about my suffering more than yours. I try. I didn't really think about you guys this morning while I was up for 3.5 hours. I was thinking about my suffering, right? I wanted to get out of it. I didn't want to feel the way I was feeling. You see, so like you have to like you got to really check in with yourself. Like, oh, okay, well, I know how to get out of this. I had to plant seeds. I need to help other people. So I guess I got to think of other people, right? It's stone cold logic. Your heart could be cold and distant and whatever metaphor you use in your own language for someone who doesn't give a shit about other people. Cold hearted, right? But the logic is perfected. You could be a cold hearted, don't fill in the rest of the words, Tim, person and still plant good seeds. And I know every single one of you thought a different word and in your own language. And I'm happy to think and that makes me happy that I made you think. You see. So I don't know. And this is what we struggle with. And I think that's the like be honest with yourself. Like I'm a bodhisattva. Yeah, I'm a bodhisattva who thinks about himself a lot, right? And you try not to, but like you want the pain to go away. You want your suffering. You want your mind. You want peace. And then blah, 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 and like that happens. You know, to be completely altruistic as a bodhisattva is a high thing, and really, frankly, you don't get there until you see emptiness directly anyway. So don't beat yourself up if you think about yourself a lot. Okay, it's all right. Right. But just keep coming back. That's why we listen. That's why we go to class. Just keep coming back. You know, just one good seed a day. Just do one good thing. It changes everything. And then, of course, the third scope is going to be the Bodhisattva track, the ones who are doing it so they can reach. Now, look, they're doing it to reach total enlightenment so they can help other people. I'm reaching for total enlightenment. Oh, really? Okay. Oh, sounds like there might be a little selfishness in that, right? Maybe not, right? I'm going to do it so I can really help all living beings, right? Who's the I that does it? You know, and Bodhisattva's service to others is unparalleled, right? And it's not like they're just hiding away like selfishly at all. It's not how it works, right? But bit by bit, we start gathering the capacity to share with others. Like the thing that made me so sad last night in my 3:30 reverie was that it actually was thinking about other people. Like, how many people are just alone or feel like they're entirely alone? I couldn't even get a hug from my cats. There are 8 billion people on this planet and I couldn't get a hug at 3:30 in the morning. Right? Like, and then I started thinking about, oh my God, do other people feel this? Damn. And then I just started thinking about the isolation. And then when I was scrolling on Facebook and everyone just stupidly yelling at each other in comments, I'm like, this is isolation. This is isolation expressing itself as anger. Maybe that's the bodhicitta. Maybe that's the thing. Like if we're all alone, then are we really all alone if we're all experiencing loneliness? Or do we have something in common with each other? I, you know, maybe I posted this the other day. Like maybe we should normalize telling our friends that we love them, right? Maybe we should normalize that. And it's not weird. Like it's like what's worse, feeling alone at 3:30 in the morning or being like, wow, I have all these friends that yeah, my friends don't hug me in bed. Like that's not really normal and appropriate, but I know that they love me, right? And I started thinking about my friends and I was like, yeah, I was talking to a friend last night. You know, we actually helped each other both. He was having problems earlier in the day and then I was having some difficulty later on and we helped each other. And we're like, we're here to support each other, right? And so I think our motivations are This is why I love Buddhism so much, is it just lays out for us all the things that it lays out for us what our reality is. Like, I don't like that it's called Buddhism because everyone goes, oh, it's a religion. Ah, be afraid of religion, scared of religion. No, shut up. Like, take all those words out. Like, Buddhism is not that. It's our human experience. And it highlights all of it. It tells us exactly what's going on. When you're laying at 3:30 in your bed trying to sleep, feeling lonely and you can't get a hug, you know, and then then Buddhism's like, yeah, I bet you there's lots of other people on this planet that are lonely. Oh, by the way, just because you're getting a hug doesn't mean you're not gonna you're gonna solve your loneliness problem, right? You know, it can feel good, but like it's a seed. Again, it's a seed, right? And how can we, you know, I don't know, like there's all these ways we can connect with each other, and yet people feel so alone. And maybe the point of Buddhism is to help us feel less lonely because we're all trying to do the same thing. I don't know. And we'll get to the last set of three on Monday, which is just basically the three vehicles. Actually, I'll do it real fast right now so we can just say we completed the class. The three vehicles we have lower way, which is the Hinayana. Okay. And then we have the Mahayana, right? The lower way would be kind of grouped. You can do this work yourself. There you guys go. You can do this work yourself. You can think a little bit. The Hinayana are people who don't understand emptiness according to mind only or middle way, and they don't have bodhicitta. The greater way people understand emptiness of the mind only and middle way, and they have the capacity to and desire to care for all beings. And this is the path of the six perfections. Now, if you look at my picture is super smart. Why? Because two of those paths actually meet. You thought there were three, but two of them meet together. Because the third way is called the diamond way. And it's secret Mahayana. And it's not separate from the Mahayana. Okay. So the Mahayana of the six perfections is what we've been studying all 15 courses so far. And you don't drop the Mahayana path of the six perfections when you enter into the path of the secret mantra. Okay. You don't. It's a branch of it. Maybe a branch, I don't know. Overlay, I don't know. Picture's not perfect, but it's an idea. So Diamond Way is a part of the Mahayana. So the path of the six perfections is one way. The path of the diamond is another way, and they're both Mahayana. And then the third way is the Hinayana. And you can figure out how they relate to all the other things. And you guys now understand the lower middle way, right? Yay! Good job. You are now experts. Wonderful. Congratulations. Did a good job. Okay. You're not expected to understand all of that right now, but take your time with it. This will be the class to review if you're trying to understand the six flavors of emptiness and to understand what's going on. Are you at level one where you just have to be like, okay, this will change. Or are you level 2 where you're like, I'm not in control. Fuck. I never was. Right. Or are you at the level where it's like, same seed, me and the thing I'm perceiving, same seed, damn it. Each one should should finish with a damn it. Damn. Right. You know, or you're like, oh, that thing wasn't there until I perceived it. Lower middle way. Dang. I thought it was there before I got there. The pen was there before I got there. No, it wasn't a pen until I perceived it. Dang. Right. And then next class, we're going to do the upper middle way and break that apart. The basis of imputation, the thing that you put the pen onto, the seed opens up. That's what we're going to bring into question in the upper middle way. The thing that you thought was there that became the pen, that's co-created in the independent branch of the middle way. Co-creation goes away. Dang, I'm 100% responsible. Damn it. That's a good t-shirt, Anastasia. Damn it. It's 100% me. Okay. All right. Thank you. Hope you have a wonderful day. We'll be back in 25 minutes with some more Lam Rim study of emptiness, gift of liberation. Thank you all for joining. I'm so happy you're all here. Cool. And say goodbye to each other, please.
Thank you, Tim. Goodbye.
До побачення.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Gracias.
Have a great day.
Gracias.
Send your thumbs up and thanks.
Vielen Dank.
Thank you. Javier.
Thank you. Merci. Tuk J. We love you.